should have been prepared before I got up here, but, you know, by far it is easier to speak to a live audience than to speak to that thing up there. I did it for a few Wednesday nights there, and man, you just, are they with me? Are y'all awake? And you can look, you know, in people's eyes, and you can tell if they're, you know, if they're following you. So. That was easy, yeah. Well, whatever we have to do. I want to start off in Mark chapter 6, and this will be our scripture text. We'll start in Mark chapter 6, verse 45. If you remember, right before that, Jesus had just fed the 5,000. And it says, immediately he made his disciples, I've missed that before, but he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, to Bethsaida. While he himself was sending the multitude away, after bidding them farewell, he departed to the mountains to pray. And when it was evening, the boat was in the midst of the sea, and he was alone on land. And seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, and it was about the 4th watch of the night. And he came walking to them on the sea. And here's another part that I missed always. I don't think I've ever remembered reading this, but I know it did. I just didn't pay attention to it. But he intended to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed that it was a ghost and cried out. For they all saw him and they were frightened. But immediately he spoke to them and said to them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped, and they were greatly astonished. For they had not gained any insight from the incident of the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. So we're going to talk about the contrary winds in a Christian's life. Where do you go in times of storm? You know, and I thought, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. And if it don't kill us, it'll make us stronger. Several years ago, Richard McCool and myself and Glenn Todd, we all lost our jobs about the same time. Remember that, brother? Every morning we met right out here, and we went walking on the trail, and we encouraged each other, and, you know, I think we even prayed some. And you got a job yet? Nope. You? Nope. And we, you know, and it just stuck out in my mind that, you know, God has always taken care of me before, but at that time I was worried. Luckily, I had a good job before that, and I'd saved some money up, so we were all right. We were making ends meet, but, you know, when it's all going out and none coming in, it kind of depletes in a hurry. But I've thought back many times through my life that the Lord has helped me through so many different situations. But I thought, you know, about this text, and maybe my heart was hardened. Maybe I forgot about all those times, because when we go to God and ask Him, do we go and ask Him expecting Him to answer us? And do we start looking for the answer? Do we start looking, where is he going? You know, what's going to happen? So anyway, here they were, and they were on the middle of this sea, and they were toiling and they're rowing, it said, because the wind was contrary unto them. This was an actual experience of the early disciples in a literal sea. You remember those sayings that how hard it is walking uphill, or have you ever tried to paddle upstream or swim upstream? Used to, down at the bottom of our property line on that creek, that current was so strong that you could swim hard as you could and it'd hold you in place. If you slowed down, you're going backwards, but if you didn't, and it just kind of made me think about here these guys they just come off of a miracle with Jesus fed the 5,000. They didn't even think about that. They're panicking out because the water is rough. But God knows best. He gave us these winds to distribute the heat and for the distribution of rainfall. If the heat which comes from the sun stayed and fell on the equator region, it would be far too hot to have life there. And in the northern region, it would lock down an eternal frost without the winds. We can't have winds, however, without having them sometimes for us and sometimes against us. But that keeps us from being dull and boring. Change makes life interesting, and struggles makes us stronger. It says, "Blessed is the man who perseveres under trials, for once he's been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him." James chapter 1 and verse 2. So, to make us stronger, God gives us a free will to choose what we're going to do, how we're going to handle the situation. Are we going to react positive? Or are we going to react negatively? Another story that reminded me when I did this lesson, my son Blake and I were out in the bay. We just had bought my first and only brand new boat. And we were out in the bay, and there was a deep channel that ran down on it, but both sides were super shallow, real shallow. So we'd get out on the shallow part and throw back into the drop-off and try to catch fish. And I mean, just in a matter of seconds, the wind picked up, and it started blowing, thunder and lightning, rain blowing sideways. And those waves and that little old shallow thing, it was taking that boat and it would rock it like this and then come back over. And I was like, oh. And I look over there, and poor little old Blake, I think he was about 8 or 10 years old. His hands were white. He was gripping so hard on that rail. And I said, "Son, what you doing?" He said, "Praying." And I thought, he's got something. He knew not to count on his dad, but he counted on his heavenly Father. And we've had a lot of fun talking about that, but I was proud of him in that moment. In the countries where there's the least effort it requires for man's survival, he's had the least initiative and the lowest ambition and has made slight progress. It just goes to prove that sometimes hard times can make us a better person. Nobody likes it when it's going on, but it happens to all of us. And we could start over here and go around the room, and every one of us in here could tell about some hard times that we faced. When I learned about hard work, I remembered my first car that I got. And man, when Daddy was paying for the tires, I'd light that thing up and then all of a sudden he said, "They're on you now, son." And I went down to the tire store and I went, "How much?" And all of a sudden that cost meant something to me. And I think we need to think about life that way. When we go through hard times, if we make it out, we're going to be a better person for it. We're going to be stronger, and hopefully our faith will grow. We have to row against those contrary winds. This is a great analogy as we go through our life. Man still has the battle. The world is one of exhortation and struggle. Man must face the elements, the material world, and wrestle with forces in evil, in moral, and our spiritual world. What if salvation had no real cost to us? You know, you think, well, we just sang a song that said salvation's free, but is it really free? What does it cost us? Well, I tell you what it should cost us. It should cost us everything. We should realize that when we accept Christ, we die to ourselves, and this is no longer Doug Lee living in here. It's Christ living in me. And if we think about that, it costs us a lot. It costs us our life. And not just going out flippantly doing whatever we want to, you know. It means something to us when we, you know, realize what it costs Christ too. God doesn't lay resistance upon the winds, but rather He permits them to blow against us. And at time He quietens the winds in a brief session from the storm, lest man be overcome. So He does give us a break. You know, when I thought about this the other day when the storms was coming, and I think Troy's comments was, well, we don't want to pray for it to go somewhere, you know, somewhere else. Don't get me, get them over there, you know. I mean, that kind of goes against our Christian principles. So, you know, keep us safe, Lord. Keep us all safe. So, but there's no escape from opposing forces or winds when we become a Christian. You know, I know a lot of people that had the expectation when they became a Christian, oh, my life is going to be just simple and easy and no problems and no worries. If we ever tell anybody that, we're telling them a lie. That's not true. You know, that's when the devil really starts coming on to you, because he's always had you before, no matter how good you were. But the children of God in all ages had to face them, the winds of hate, misrepresentation, betrayal, persecution. Miscalculated plans have flown against them with a fury. In fact, the winds have always seemed contrary to everyone who's ever had an earnest and high purpose in life. You think about people like Joseph and about Paul. Now, Joseph was sold into slavery by his envious and hateful brothers. Now, how would you like that to happen? Troy, you got a brother. I've got two brothers. I'm selling you. You're out of here because Dad likes you better than me, or at least we think he does. I mean, you know, sometimes we just read these things and we don't really think about them. But that was enough to get a man down. But, you know, just when things seemed to be going wrong, then they got even worse. You know, he was sold into slavery. He had his reputation ruined. There was a woman who tried to get him to be her secret lover, and he refused and ran out from her, and so she just, you know, tore his character up. Everything seemed to be getting worse, and God was preparing him, though, for a higher and more noble calling. He would soon be the second highest official in Egypt. But you see, Joseph had a choice, either to do good or to do evil. And by doing right, God was driving Joseph in the right direction. He just didn't know it at the time. And here's Troy's. I'm going to try to get it right. You might have to help me out here. But doing right's always right, and doing wrong's always wrong. And there's another one, but that's close enough. But think about it. You know, these people that we're looking at here today, and look at the things that they faced. And, you know, our afflictions basically are pretty light compared to them. You know, Paul was an apostle, and he had a battle from the get-go. Let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11. I know you know all these, but it's good for us to look at them again. Chapter 11 and verse 24. 5 times I received from the Jews 39 lashes. 5 different times he got. 3 times he was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked, a night and a day, and I spent the night in the deep. I have been on frequent journeys and dangers from rivers and dangers from robbers, danger from my countrymen, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers from city, dangers in the wilderness, and dangers of the sea, and dangers amongst false brethren. I have been in labor and hardship, and through many sleepless nights, and hunger and thirst, often without food, and cold and exposure. And apart from all these external things, there's a daily pressure upon me of the concern of all the churches. You know, that just amazes me. He's telling you all these different things that he's gone through. But more importantly, you know, was his concern for the churches. His heart was right. Paul had problems with contrary winds. How bad did they get and require? Much toiling in his rowing, but his journey on life, he made it through. And he declared, the things which happened unto me have fallen out rather unto the furtherance of the gospel. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 12. They finally put him to death, but in losing he won, and in dying he lives. Adverse winds discipline us. By having plans go wrong, we learn to be more humble and more dependent upon God. Unrealizing the aims to teach us that the Lord's will we shall live, and we shall do this or do that. James chapter 4 and verse 15. I think often we forget about that. You know, what you going to do next week? Well, I'm going up here and I'm going to buy this piece of land. We forget to say if it's the Lord's will. We learn to put our trust where it belongs when we go through hardships. God knows we need discipline. Though it's grievous at the time, it's for our own good. Now, no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, after it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 12. You know, speaking of discipline too, I never thought discipline was good. But at the same time, I think it made me the man that I am today. You know, my dad didn't tell you but one time, and the next time he was reaching for that belt, and then you was running. You know, so I think the Lord knows what we can handle and what we need. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, he offered up Isaac. You think about that. He was promised that his descendants would be innumerable, basically, paraphrasing. But yet, when God told him to take Isaac and offer him up, off he went. And, you know, he raised his hand to slay him. And it was God, it was then that God saw his hand and said, now I know that you fearest me. Genesis 22 and 12. If a man goes through with his life with no testing, he may become self-reliant and not God-reliant. You know, sometimes you see people and maybe they're not showing you, but you think, man, they got a pretty smooth ride. But adverse conditions, losing a job it happened to me twice. And you go, man, whew. But it didn't kill me and it didn't ruin me. So we need to remember those times that God has come through for us. Opposing winds provide an opportunity for a greatness. to shine as gold. Job, in his inspiring example, was a perfect and upright man, and one that feared God and eschewed or escaped evil. On one day, his cattle were stolen, his sheep were destroyed, his camels were taken, nearly all of his servants were slain, and his 7 sons were killed. Job chapter 1, verse 13 to 19. He had been great all the time, and has just commented on what a man of God he was, but a deeper and more noble greatness began to shine through like pure gold. He fell down on the ground and he worshiped and said, "Naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord give, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job chapter 1, verse 20-21. In all of this, Job did not sin or charge God foolishly. Job chapter 1, verse 22. Now think about these men that we just talked about. My goodness, that's some polishing of the old coal turn it into a diamond. This wasn't all, though. He was afflicted with boils from his head to his toes, and had this wife to contend with, who said, "Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die." Job chapter 2 and verse 9. But Job stood the storm, and he faithfully replied, "Thou speakest as one of the foolish women. Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?" Job chapter 2 and verse 10. Then there was his friends who chided him, but Job withstood the fiery trials of the opposing forces, and he said, When he tried me, I shall become forth as gold." Job chapter 23 in verse 10. And he did. So when we're going through times like that, just think really how easy we got it. And think once we get on the other side of wherever we're at, how much stronger we'll be if we don't cave into it. God permits things to be fixed against us to teach us to set ourselves against them. We are potential heroes, but each must prevail in his own struggle. Moses had to go through a preparation period of struggle to get ready for a great task of leading the children of Israel out of Egypt. An easy life with no trials is like a mushroom, which groweth up at night, and it's a pulpy thing. If you notice, right after a heavy dew, these old mushrooms will pop up everywhere, and you can just barely walk by them and they'll fall over. But an oak tree, they are mankind who are like this. Psalms chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. The winds will cry out, and the oak will stretch forth its limbs and twist and bend. The roots thrust down in the ground beneath the rocks, and it makes it stand. And it's stronger because of the storm. We wrestle with things which go wrong, opposing forces. In the end, wrestling develops those graces which bond in a bundle that are called character. Perfection? No, we're going to still mess up. We're going to be beaten sometimes, as long as we don't remain that way. But we can remain faithful and grow stronger in our faith in God. Some distressing winds that many of us will face. Betrayal by a supposed friend. Think about Jesus and the heartbreaking experience he had with Judas. Judas gave him the kiss of betrayal, but Jesus had no animosity for him whatsoever. Occasionally we might experience a kiss from Judas. And when it occurs, we need to recall that the disciple is not above his master. If he had to do it, why shouldn't we? Persecution by enemies. It's another opportunity for us to be blessed. Blessed are ye when men cast insults at you and persecute you and say all sorts of evil against you, falsely on my account. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 1. I don't know about you, but that's a hard thing for me to do. I don't know if it had something to do with my upbringing, but I think I even said this last week. I'd rather be beat any day than for somebody to attack me or attack my character or attack my wife. We had some experience with this with our little girl. Sarah's sister started attacking us and saying, y'all are some kind of Christians. You know what Doug wanted to do? Give me that phone. I'll call her and straighten her out. But you know what Sarah said? Just ignore it. Don't even worry about it. And I think the people that know us the best, when people attack our character, they'll go, that's not the guy I know. That's not the woman I know. They don't do that. Lying tongues which hurt you in church work, in your business, in your neighborhood. This was the suffering of Jesus. Where there's smoke, there's a little fire. Jesus and Joseph and Paul and many others were all surrounded by lying tongues. The smoke was the only result of the lying tongues spread by backbiters, haters of the truth. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 44, you can be blessed by speaking well of those that curse you and by doing good to them that hate you. It's a tough thing to do. But when you look at what these other people faced, it just seems such a light thing for us as Christians in 2020. We can't let people tell us how we're going to act or what kind of day we're going to have. We have to be able to just blow it off. Financial backsets, which may be a loss of a job or failure or overlooked promotion or unwise investment. But the world keeps on turning and we don't give up. If I cannot do what I wish, then I must wish to do what I can. Here once again we're given the insight through God's Word to deal with this issue. A man's life consists not of the abundance of the things which he possesses. Luke chapter 12 verse 15. There's advantages and our disadvantages. Being poor in many ways is a state of mind. We can lack in financial ways, but we can be blessed in our health, in our family, in our spirituality. That's what really makes a rich person. Doesn't matter because you can't take none of this with you when you go. The way we live our lives and loyal to our family, we got good health, and we worship God and praise His name and look for opportunities to share that with other people. An accident which bears physical and financial injury. This can teach us patience and the mastery of self. Paul said, through inspiration, I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therefore to be content. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 11. And you think about the things that Paul went through when he was on the high and preaching the Word of God, or when he was in prison, or being beat by rods or stoned or whatever. He learned to be content in all of those states. Forgetting those things which are behind, I reach forth unto the things that are before me. Philippians chapter 3 and verse 10. We don't need to live in the past. keep pressing on. Think about, was it Brother Blackwell? Is that his name? They had the four-wheeler wreck. And he's still out there in his wheelchair preaching. How many of us would just give up and say, just push me somewhere under a tree and bring me in at night? Loss of health, it may be ourselves or it may be another family member. In either case, it can be devastating. In most cases, loss of health is regained, but if it's not, we can learn to live with the ailment and become stronger spiritually because of our ailment or our handicap. Second, our 3 John, verse 2, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayst prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prosper. Sickness has brought many people to the highest point of their health. Obstacles can be turned into stepping stones. If we suffer from an ailment that cannot be cured, then we should accept it gracefully. It's easier said than done too, isn't it? Nobody wants to be in pain all the time or hurting all the time. I've heard my father-in-law say many times, it's getting old, ain't no fun. He has his good days when he's in his mind, and then other days he don't even know where he's at. Victory over adversaries can bring our finest days. Paul had a thorn in the flesh, which we don't really know what it was, but at the end of life he wrote, I have fought the good fight. Disappointment of various kinds or losses of a loved one. Paul stated, Wherefore we would have come to you, even I, Paul, once again, but Satan hindered us. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 8. All of us at one time or another will experience loss of a loved one, and I don't think there's really any way we can ever prepare for that. Even when people are getting older and you know it's going to happen, I don't think you can really be prepared for it. The Lord gave and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job chapter 1, verse 21. David wrote concerning his son Absalom, Wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 23. Faith is sometimes lost when things go well. It can be a danger from interrupted prosperity because they have no changes. Therefore, they fear not God. Psalms 55 and verse 19. Pride has been the fall of many a man, especially men that think they're self-made men. Think of the rich young ruler in Luke chapter 12, verse 16 and 20. We should never leave God out of our plans because things are going good. All the more reason for us to be thankful and to praise Him. Stormy waves cause the anchor to take a stronger grip. Contrary winds can be instructive, corrective, sanctifying, and satisfying. No matter which way the wind blows, I can so set my sail that it will blow, that will be to my advantage. Maybe you have been struggling with things of the world. Maybe you need some prayers from the church. If you need anything, if you want to give your life to the Lord tonight and put Him on in baptism, anything we can help you with, come forward while we sing this song.